Hello everyone, and welcome to this last session of the day. So my name is Thibaut Mourgue, and I'm a member of the WAP Executive Committee, head of the editorial board, and also a managing partner of Camden Advisory, a company specialized on sustainable finance and PPPs. It's my pleasure to bring you this session on energy transition, with a particular but not exclusive focus on transport. And our discussion will assess whether and under what conditions PPPs can be a game changer to achieve the energy transition. So we are lucky to have today a fantastic panel to address these questions. On my left, we have Amanda Loffen, who is CEO of Human Rights for Water and a member of the WAP Steering Committee. Amanda has also a lot of experience in the energy sector in the Pacific region. She's an experienced general manager and business development executive in water, energy, and sustainable development. And she provides sustainable solutions based on human rights to improve water and energy governance worldwide. She works mainly in developing countries in Central America, Africa, and South Asia. Next, we have Tim Clark. Tim is CEO of a Warson Waste Management company. Tim has long experience in power generation business globally. He's previously been head of engineering and production at companies such as National Power, International Power, Scottish Power, AES, GMR, Control Global, TACA, and APH. And most recently, he's been CEO at Taweelah IYPP in the UAE. He's been also CEO at Bahrain LNG before joining as a CEO of a Warson Waste Management company in March 2021. The company constructing and operating the world's largest energy from waste facility at Warson, Dubai. And next, we have Majid Ideisan Abu Abdul, who is a senior engineer at the Ministry of Energy and Investment of the UAE and a distinguished expert in power purchase agreements, ESCOs, and renewable energy. Majid is also a CMVP and CEM professional, currently spearheading the tendering and execution of two major federal retrofitting projects covering the federal roads network and multiple governmental buildings throughout the Northern Emirates. Next, we have Nicolas Claude, who is CEO of Airport International Group, and as such leverages a long-standing 30-year career within the global airport industry to spearhead the expansion and operation project of Amman Queen Alia International Airport. Throughout his professional journey, Claude assumed numerous C-suite positions, most recent of which was CEO of Santiago International Airport Concession in Chile. And last but not least, we have Mohamed Atif. As an economist and area manager for DNV, over the years he has successfully positioned DNV as a leading energy transition company, supporting multi-gigawatts of high-impact projects in MEA, and with a specific focus in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, covering the entire energy value chain from hydrocarbons and CCS strategies through to renewables, electrification of transport, energy storage deployment, and green hydrogen, as well as intelligent networks and sustainable end use. So, let me say a few words of introduction. As a matter of fact, energy transition has been one of the most pressing issues for the global community, and the transport sector is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for about 24% of global emissions. So this is a significant challenge, as the transport sector is expected to grow significantly in the coming decades. So in this context, public-private partnerships can play a key role in fostering energy transition. They can help to deliver large-scale infrastructure projects such as new public transportation systems, electric vehicle charging networks, and others. PPPs can also help to bring together the expertise of public and private sectors to develop and implement innovative new technologies and solutions. For instance, to deploy electric buses, autonomous vehicles, energy-efficient roads and bridges, and other new technologies that can help to reduce emissions from the transport sector. So this session will showcase some of the latest projects in the sector and demonstrate to investors the opportunities and challenges of PPP finance. So we shall have 2 rounds of questions to our panelists, and we also have the audience ask a question by the end of the session. So without further ado, let's start with Nicolas Claude. Nicolas, the transport sector, and particularly the aviation sector, is maybe one of the most difficult to decarbonize. So can you tell us, based on your experience at Queen Alia Airport, what are the potential strategies for airport decarbonization?
Yes, thank you, Thibaut. Good afternoon, everyone. So Amman Airport, Queen Alia International Airport, is one of the Group ADP network of 28 airports. So Group ADP being Paris airports. So Group ADP is focused and really turned on having an eco-friendly transport industry and a new sustainable airport model. So as such, Queen Alia International Airport and Airport International Group, the operator of the PPP of Queen Alia International Airport, has been focused for many years now in the carbon emission reduction of Amman Airport. Through different, of course, strategies. Just to highlight, before coming to the strategies, that we have been the first airport in the Middle East in 2008 to obtain the level 3+, the neutrality for the Airport Council International Carbon Accreditation Scheme. And last year, Queen Alia International Airport has been newly the first in the Middle East and the second in the whole Asia Pacific to obtain the carbon accreditation level 4+. The level 4+ is the net zero carbon accreditation of SCI, so which commits the airport and the community, and we will see that the stakeholders on the path to reach the net zero carbon before 2050. So this is the general context where we are. Just SCI Airports Council International represent the collective interest of all airports worldwide and promote excellence in the aviation industry. So the first step for as a strategy in terms of airport decarbonization is clearly to be part of a system or a framework that will structure, organize the way we will reduce our carbon emission and meet the objectives of the net zero carbon now for us. So having this system in place and being part of this system, in our case being part of the SCI carbon accreditation system, your first objective after having done a mapping of your carbon emissions. So first you start with a mapping of your carbon emission, but of course, just after that, the main objective is to start implementing measures to reduce your energy consumption. So we have done that from many years now in Queen Alia International Airport. It has been based on energy audits. So we have received companies and consultants that have helped us to identify which would be the measures that we would implement as quick wins in the first stage, and then in the long term to reduce our energy consumption and consequently the carbon emissions. So this has been from the beginning, as we have started this journey, we have relied always on our employees. And this is an important part, and I will come back later on this. to reach the objectives. We had to mobilize and to explain and to train the employees on the objectives of what we were trying to achieve with these accreditations. So this is an important part of the way to reach something that will allow measures to be implemented efficiently in the company and at the airport. So to give you just an indication, we are calling the scope 2 in energy or carbon accreditation process. We are calling the scope 2 the energy that we are consuming from the grid. So coming from outside of the airport. In our case, in AIG, it represents 93% of the emissions, the total emissions of the airport. So energy for us and the energy that we are getting for the grid is the most important part of the carbon emissions. So thanks to the measures that we have implemented to reduce the energy consumption, between 2012 and 2022, we have reduced our energy consumption 47%. At the same time, we have inaugurated a new terminal with far more square meters than we added with the previous terminal, and the traffic has grown 25%. So it gives you an indication of the importance of the measures that have been implemented to reduce the consumption of energy. What are these measures? Just not to go into too many details, but first, moving to LED lighting. It seems obvious, but it's a big operation. Here we are not talking about the terminal, the airport terminal lighting, but also the runway lighting, the taxiway lighting. We have changed equipment to be more energy efficient. And one of the most important measures that we have implemented to reduce our energy consumption has been the optimization of the air conditioning. In general, air conditioning is the most important consumer in terms of energy due to the volume of an airport terminal. So we have been working very intensively on this aspect, which has allowed us to reach these reductions. I have mentioned the employees before, and I just want to insist a little bit on this and to highlight other points. We will reach our target with the support of all the stakeholders and of the employees. And what is important is to have these employees having the opportunity to lead initiatives to reduce energy. And recently, 2 years ago, we have implemented employees have proposed an initiative which was to reduce or to better manage the air conditioning in the offices of the terminal. It can seem something obvious, but we are more used to switch off the light than switch off the air conditioning when we are leaving an office. And through this optimization of the air conditioning, switching off during the night and the weekend, which was not automatically done before, we have also reached important savings. So all this is to underline the importance of the stakeholders and the participants being aligned on these global objectives for the PPP to reach the carbon accreditation targets. Coming to the strategies for the medium term and the long term, of course, after having obtained or generated the quick wins in terms of energy reduction, we are now in a phase where we are implementing more complex and challenging projects to continue reducing our energy consumption. This is a permanent work and permanent target. After that, what is important for us is to have access to green energy because, as I mentioned before, most of our carbon emissions, I'm talking as an airport, I'm not talking about airlines, but as an airport, most of our emissions are related to energy consumption. So then having access to green energy is key for the future and for reaching the targets of this accreditation. That's why we are we have a project to implement a solar farm at Queen Alia International Airport that will account for a significant part of our energy needs and providing green energy to the airport in line with the objective that we have. This we will have a solar farm very soon of 4.8 megawatt at Queen Alia International Airport that will account for 20 to 25% of our energy needs. For the long-term vision and to reach finally the objective, we also need some change in the regulatory framework locally. So we need to have access to renewable energy certificates, which is an important aspect and which is not always available in all the countries. In Jordan, for example, for the time being, we cannot have access to green certified energy from the grid, which something that can seem to be obvious in some places is not always the case. And we want also, of course, to have access to green energy locally and not only to buy it or to buy certificates abroad. So we are closely working with the Jordanian government to look at these changes in the regulation or implementation of new aspects that will allow us to move forward with the decarbonization of the airport. We are considering some new technologies. Energy storage is something that we have looked at today. For the scale of our needs, it's still too early to have, we have assumed, or we have analyzed that it's too early to have access to energy storage on the airport. So in the future, of course, new technologies will make this journey to the net zero carbon easier. But as we will discuss it later on, what is key also to reach the implementation and the definition of these strategies is the collaboration with all the stakeholders at the airport and the government entities.
Thank you, Nicolas, for this very rich presentation. We'll come back to you later. I will now ask Tim. Tim, you operate the largest waste-to-energy plant in the world. Can you tell us how your company contributes to the circular economy and to the decarbonization targets?
Yeah, the Energy from Waste scheme is effectively taking the waste from Dubai and turning it into electricity. So we fulfil the recycle element of the reuse, repurpose triangle. What that effectively does is, for our particular plant being the largest in the world, is processing 1.9 million tonnes of waste each year, which is around 45% of the total waste from Dubai. And that will be processed through the plant to generate 215 megawatts of electricity and recycle all of the metals that we can out of the waste material from the ash side, and then the ash itself goes into recycling processes for principally probably road construction, for material for road construction. So effectively we're recycling almost all of the waste into a useful product. The benefits that brings is we avoid putting waste into landfill, which is the key part of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed's sustainability of Dubai 2030, which is to make Dubai a sustainable city. And part of that is Dubai municipality's zero to landfill target by 2030. So we want to eliminate all landfill by 2030. Because we eliminate the landfill, waste doesn't degrade, decompose, so methane emissions, CO2 emissions are avoided by not putting into landfill. Additionally, the liquid waste that would normally come from the decomposition of waste doesn't filter into the ground, into watercourses, so has an environmental benefit as well by doing that. And because we generate 215 megawatts of electricity, you don't need to produce that from the DEWA system, so that's 200 megawatts of carbon-based fuel, so CCGT gas-fired power station that no longer requires to run. The net effect of that is 65 million tonne CO2 staving over the 35 years of the project. So that's the big environmental benefit. The circular economy part is the recycling, utilising the ash. So repurposing all of the waste that would normally be thrown away is found a second use, either as energy or as recycled products. The contribution financially to that, through a PPP, we're actually a concession contract. So effectively, the company has raised the finance with its sponsors, and the company is remunerated by Dubai municipality through payment of tariffs for the disposal of the waste and the purchase of the electricity that we produce. So effectively it's financed externally from international financing, and then recuperated at fixed return from the tariffs over the 35 years. So it's a very advantageous way for Dubai municipality to achieve its objectives without having the financial risks of actually funding the projects itself through the concession arrangement, PPP arrangement.
Thank you, Tim. That was very clear. And I will turn to Mohamed Atif. Mohamed, you have a considerable experience in transport in the region. So how do you see the prospect, especially in road electrification?
Right, thanks, thanks, Thibaut. I apologize to the audience on this side. I'm sat in a really funny position, so if I don't turn around to you, I'm not ignoring you. It's not on purpose. Yeah, I mean, as has been explained in your introduction as well, the electrification of transport is one of the key ways to drive the energy transition, to reduce carbon emissions, and to be on our pathway to net zero. Both globally, electrification is moving faster than some had expected. Recent statistics have shown, I think published by the IEA, that in the first 5 months of this year, approximately 20% of cars sold worldwide were EVs, electric vehicles. So that's a pretty telling sign. We've just produced our 2050 energy transition outlook, and we've as many organizations have, we've also produced some forecasts, and we're expecting by 2031 that approximately 50% of all vehicles sold will be electric. And by 2050, we're expecting that approximately 75% of the stock of vehicles on the road will be electric. So there is a transition. There will be a mix of electric vehicles on the road and still ICE vehicles on the road as well. The breadth of the electrification, we're seeing it obviously in passenger vehicles. We're seeing it in the very quickly in the short distance scooters and things like that. But we're seeing it in buses. We're seeing it in other public transport. So it's moving pretty quickly from that perspective. In terms of linking that to PPP, etc., it's any time there is a new industry and there's a mass transformation which requires not just the product, i.e. the vehicles, but infrastructure as well. That's where having these partnerships in place becomes very, very instrumental, sharing the costs, providing the incentives, and risk management. And around the world now, we've seen many acts, many initiatives, whether it's some of the Green Deal acts in Europe or the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. You're seeing a lot of incentives and enablers with respect to, for example, if EVs are producing lower emissions, they're either given credits or lower taxes. And for the vehicle charging infrastructure, you're seeing incentives in place to help expand those as well. So I think a mixture of policy, the economics themselves, as we get to scale, mass production, you will increasingly see the electrification of transport all around. And the final piece I would say, and it's very important and perhaps was initially overlooked, are the critical minerals behind the vehicles, behind the charging infrastructure that enable the transition to happen. And so a lot of investment, a lot of partnership, a lot of support with access is also needed on that side. So it's the full supply chain that requires an overhaul, and that's what is happening.
Thank you, Mohamed. I will now turn to Amanda. Amanda, you've been closely associated to the working groups of UNEC. Can you present us a case study that particularly well illustrates how PPPs can support the energy transition?
Thank you, Thibault. Actually, listening to Mohammed, I'm just wondering whether it's such a good idea after all, because the project I was going to talk about was biodiesel and biofuels. But actually, I think we've got till 2050, haven't we? Where there's still quite a lot of years where it could be useful. So biofuel is an alternative to fossil fuels. It has advantages because it's created over a short period of time from living organisms, and the process of growing the biofuel actually helps to absorb some of the carbon that's produced in burning the fuels. And so it actually does have a strong contribution to greenhouse gases. It's actually, or decrease of gases, I should say. It's had an increase of about tenfold since the year 2000. It's being produced at about 2,000 barrels per day globally. And the USA is currently the largest producer by multiple factors. The largest being Brazil, which is less than half the size. I think the US produces about 38% of the global product. And it's been used for decades as an additive to fuels, so blended with fossil fuels that may be 5 or 10%. So it's been considered as something to offset the cost spikes in fuels, as well as maybe reducing greenhouse gases, and also as a reliance to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. It's made from corn and sugarcane. And also the biodiesel, well, so that's for the bioethanol, and then biodiesel is from vegetable oils and animal fats. And so it's got an important role in decarbonizing road transportation in the next few decades. In Latin America, which is where the project is that I'm going to talk about, it's got two of the leading biofuel producers in the world, and so it also has a key market with a growing population and fuel demand. Brazil is the largest, and they've been including ethanol as a mandatory component of fuel since 1975, and it's now up to something like 27% as a minimum level in blended with fossil fuels. They also sell pure ethanol in petrol stations, and it's often cheaper than normal petrol. And 80% of the cars on the road actually run on any ratio of ethanol and gasoline in the country. So they really are moving quite a long way in that direction. Argentina, which is the country where the PPP project is much smaller. It's sixth in the world in terms of productivity for biofuels. It's had a mandated blend of ethanol, but only in the last 10 or 12 years. And it's at 10%, a lot lower than Brazil. They had a major study recently, which is what kicked off this PPP. It was done by the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, and it showed a major development opportunity for the province of Cordoba. And it was based on this spike expected at global level to fulfill environmental targets. So Cordoba is a province in the center of Argentina, which is a major agricultural province, and it produces an abundant supply of soybean and corn, both of which are raw materials for biodiesel and bioethanol. It's also a leading exporter of soybean oil, and it has more than 100 companies of different sizes and an installed capacity of over 7 million tons of oil. And so there was an opportunity, especially with, they have excess installed capacity for producing the biofuels. There was an opportunity there for them to produce more local biofuel. So the case study that I'm going to describe to you, which was a finalist in the forum this April in Athens, was an initiative of the provincial government to use biodiesel in its pure state not blended with fossil fuels, to use agricultural farmers and companies to use for their own transportation, for machinery and for on-farm transportation, but not for a commercial operation. And so the public part of the relationship was the provincial government, and then the private part was the biofuel producers, or the farmers, and their own biodiesel plants. So the case here was a company called well, no, it's not just one company. The case is actually the state, because they've taken on this PPP role by introducing new laws that incentivize the farmers to produce biofuels, process it into oils, and then use it for their own transportation. And they've developed a specialized financing incentive, which is overseen by a blend of public and private companies, to provide up to 10% in a non-repayable grant, and then the 90% remainder as a 4-year repayable low-interest loan. I think it was at 12%. So it was basically to incentivize a number of small producers to invest and cover their transportation with biofuel. So this is quite new. It's quite a new development. The law was only introduced in 2021. The first case, or the first company that I could find in the press that's actually successfully achieved this, is a company called RB Agronegocios in Tralasierra, Cordoba. And they're the first to get there's a certification that they've produced, B100, through this program. And it's only been enabled because of the validity of the law that supports them, and also this process of certification that gives them the ability to operate. The case is producing pure state biodiesel. It's not blended. It's produced in their own plant. There's no waste. Everything is used, but from the biomass of the beans to the oil produced to the glycerin, which is also a side product used for feed and pharmaceutical products. So there's absolutely no waste. And it's helping them move towards the energy transition using this new process. So I think it's an interesting case, because they've got a number of new companies in the pipeline. They're either individuals who want to invest or farmers who want to diversify. And there's obviously an economic return in it for them. With a 4-year loan, they see that they can pay it back. So it's quite an interesting follow-up to Mohammed's presentation, where he was talking about the need for incentives. PPPs in this case are enabling an industry to get off the ground that actually is economic, but wouldn't have happened without that PPP model and the law that went with it to support it, and a system to certify the way that it's being produced. Interestingly, the vehicles that they're using this on, using pure biodiesel, are functioning perfectly well, and so they're now able to demonstrate that this is working well, and they're able to use oil produced from soybeans. So quite an interesting case.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for this successful example of PPP in energy transition. And I will turn to the public sector representative, Majid Hidaysan. You have implemented a PPP in the field of road lighting. What were the success factors in this project?
Thank you, Theo. So a brief history prior to the initiation of this first public-private partnership. The federal sector, they have initiated their involvement with PPPs in 2017 by when the Ministry of Finance have issued the first PPP manual that covers the regulatory framework for public-private partnerships. And moving forward in 2020, the Ministry of Energy have established the Financial Sustainability and Investment Department, which targets three main objectives. One of them is the establishing the regulatory framework along the relevant stakeholders for all commercial activities and infrastructural projects, and the diversification of financial resources for major projects, as well as the commercial utilization of federal assets. And considering that, the ministry have established on the pipeline several public-private partnerships that target the health sector, education, as well as the energy sector. Now, considering the UAE energy strategy, public-private partnerships, they present a very powerful enabler for meeting the objectives of the UAE energy strategy, which the energy strategy itself, it relies on two major pillars. One of them is the demand-side management, as well as the green energy generation, or the diversification of energy generation resources. And considering that, the ministry started by establishing a program for all of the federal assets, considering the roads network as well as the governmental buildings. So currently around 500 governmental buildings are being audited to be retrofitted as well as integrated with IoT systems. Now we have began with the execution from for the roads network. Around 40,000 luminaires are going to be retrofitted and integrated with the adaptive dimming system. So considering the before and after situation, you had streetlights that are powered by high pressure sodium at an efficacy of 80 lumens per watt, which is very low. Currently they are powered by LEDs at an efficacy of 160 lumens per watts. So overall, after situation, you have federal roads that whenever they are empty, there is no traffic, they are dimmed at around 70 to 80%. Whenever a car passes by, it powers to 100% for 1 hour. So this resulted in a huge energy savings. So around we are talking about the operational budget for the federal assets. It has been cut down to around 65 to 70%. And this would be a huge step towards meeting the objectives of the UAE energy strategy. And as I mentioned earlier, as well as my fellow panelists, the upcoming projects in the pipeline for public-private partnerships would present a huge opportunity for the energy transition in the region.
Thank you very much, Majid. We will come back to you. Nicola, you mentioned already the need to make all stakeholders work together to achieve energy transition. Can you elaborate a little bit on how to make this happen?
Yes, of course, Thibaut. Our PPP in Queen Alia International Airport is a 25 years PPP. The duration is a key aspect for a PPP. Many of the items that have to be addressed during a PPP are requiring time and are long processes. So the stakeholders cooperation within a PPP, we are the investor, we are called the investor, the grantor, which is the Ministry of Transport in our case, and all the entities working at the airport are all working and determinant and key for the successful implementation of the PPP. So at Queen Alia International Airport, when we are talking about decarbonization, energy transition, we have also many various committees and structures which are involving the different stakeholders at the airport. What I have explained at the beginning was for us as the airport operator, as the ones having the PPP. But of course, we will not decarbonize the airport, Amman Airport, without working with all other stakeholders. Aircraft maintenance organization, the catering, and so on. So our role also as a leader of the PPP is to coordinate all these stakeholders at the airport to reach this common objective, working closely, of course, with the government representatives. Many of these stakeholders are on the path, working with us, have an environmental management plan certified in ISO 14001. So the work is ongoing and is a long-term work. So the time here is really important. To influence and manage the emissions and the reduction of the emissions, we have different strategies that are being promoted, of course. One is what I would call the regulation based on regulations and mandates. We are working with the government, with different entities. It can be today the Ministry of Environment, tomorrow the Ministry of Energy, or grantor the Ministry of Transport, the civil aviation, of course, to implement new regulations that will help and promote and more than incentivize, but help us achieve these objectives. One short example for an airport. An aircraft being on the ground is generating its energy by an alternative power unit which is consuming kerosene. So we were willing to move to, and this is not new, but this is not systematically applied in all airports. We are willing to move to feeding the aircraft with energy, electrical energy, when it will be on the aircraft stand. It was not the case a few years ago in Amman, working with the civil aviation, and of course in close coordination with the airlines also. A regulation was issued, and now if you come as an airline to Queen Alia International Airport and you park at the aircraft stand, you will be connected to energy. It's a regulation. Every airline has to follow this regulation, which has been issued by the Civil Aviation Authority in Jordan. So it has not been done from one day to the other, but it was for us a very good example of this collaboration between us as a PPP, the authorities, to reach an important aspect. Then we have the other side, which are the best practices coordination with all the stakeholders. So when we are talking about aircraft, we are still working on this. We are working with the air navigation services to optimize the path that the aircraft is taking from the landing on the runway to the aircraft stand it will reach, where it will park. Same aircrafts are normally using all their engines during their travel on the airport infrastructure, when they could move with just a single engine. All this is not applied and systematically implemented in all airports. It requires each time the coordination with the different stakeholders, with the airlines, and with the aviation authorities to get the required authorization. Here we are talking about measures and best practices that are not only environmentally better, but also which have a significant economic sense for the airlines, because it implies an important reduction of the fuel, the kerosene consumption. This cannot be obtained with a close coordination with all the stakeholders present or part of the PPP. Another aspect for government, the work with the government, and that government entities can implement in terms of airport, is developing the cooperation with the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, to promote regulations that are incentivizing carbon emission reduction. So it's an important aspect of this. So promoting carbon offsetting also, because as I mentioned before, the strategy for reaching the net zero carbon is based on mapping, reduction of your consumptions, access to green energy, but at the end there will be a remaining part that we need to offset through International Energy Renewable Certificate, through carbon absorption processes. So this can be also defined and incentivized by government entities for the airport decarbonization. Policies, supporting policies from government entities and working closely with all the PPP stakeholders is also something that we are looking at. One of our important objectives is to facilitate and develop the access to green energy, the certified green energy. A lot remains to be done for us to have this access in possibility in Jordan. Even though Jordan has a very significant percentage of green energy in the grid, almost 30% of the energy in Jordan is coming from wind energy, solar energy, which is significant. But having access to this in a certified way to this green energy is something that requires the work between us as a PPP, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Energy, or grantor. And this is a permanent process collaboration that is part of the partnership, of course, but that we are always working on and for which, as I mentioned at the beginning, the time and the duration of the PPP is also an important parameter. To achieve all these objectives, it takes time. We are talking about changing regulations, changing practices, and initiating new measures.
I wonder whether you had to change the PPP contract because obviously when you signed this contract there was not a lot of talk about decarbonization.
So
the question is whether you had to change to amend the PPP contract to incorporate the decarbonization issues.
No, it was not necessary because this is something that comes on the top. Of course, our first mandate is to operate, maintain, and develop the airport. So this is the first mandate. The decarbonization came by our own initiative on the top of that. It's absolutely not a parameter or an obligation from our regulation, the regulation of the PPP. So absolutely not. We have proposed that to the grantor. It has of course be welcome because we could talk about something wider, which is having a sustainable tourism industry in Jordan, which is key for the kingdom. As an airport and the main gateway to Jordan, being sustainable and being part of this scheme is obviously a must. And immediately the government has supported these initiatives, so there was no need to change the PPP regulation. But it was something not required, which came on the top of the regulation, and because of our obligation, and also because, as I mentioned before, we are part of Group ADP, Paris Airport Network, so 28 airports worldwide, and we are implementing, Group ADP is implementing in all the network these changes to work for the more sustainable aviation tomorrow.
Thank you, Nicolas. Tim, so you operate a large plant. What are the challenges to upscale and duplicate your model throughout the country and in other regions?
Yeah, there's obviously enormous opportunity for energy from waste around the world or in any heavily populated area. So the actual plant is to be replicated in many locations already around the GCC. Most of the other GCC countries are looking at energy from waste projects, whether it's Oman or Saudi, Kuwait, are all looking at it. In terms of replicating the model, obviously the PPP model helps in that it reduces the investment from the government because it puts, particularly with the concession agreement arrangement, it puts the investment onus onto the company, and then you recover it through the payments over the period of time that the concession agreement runs for. So it's a very efficient way for the government to raise the finances on large infrastructure projects such as energy from waste schemes. That's obviously applicable in any country, but it obviously depends on the risk ratio for financing in a particular country, and also the ability of a the government to raise the finance itself, or whether it wants to put the finance. So whether you go for a more conventional sort of PPP type arrangement, or a build, own, operate, transfer type arrangement, or concession agreement, really depends on your appetite really for risk and for financing on the government side. But the actual principle of the concession agreement is replicable everywhere, I think. Obviously Dubai chose to do it that way. Abu Dhabi, with its energy from waste scheme, is choosing to do slightly differently, much more sort of like a build, own, operate, transfer type of arrangement. So I think it's very much a choice of how the funding looks in a particular country and a particular government, and how it would want to apply it as to which sort of framework it would go through. But it's certainly applicable everywhere, and nearly all energy from waste plants in this part of the world are looking at some form of a PPP funding, because generally speaking, waste collection is something that falls under the local government, and the waste disposal falls under the local government. So the alternative really sort of falls under government control to do that, and this is the best way of doing it. Obviously contrasts quite a lot with places like Europe, where there's much more of a sort of private enterprise side of things. So very much I think in the Africa, Middle East, Asia, it's the way to go forward with an energy from waste plant, if that's what governments want to do.
Thank you. Maybe I will ask Amanda similar questions. What are the lessons learned from the project you've showcased, and how could it be replicated elsewhere?
Yeah, well, so I came up with 4 potential learnings from this PPP. The first one was that to make it work, it needed 5 different ministries within the government to work together, because it covered the different disciplines of food, energy, transport, agroeconomy, and science and technology. So it was it required them thinking differently about the way they do things. It also involved the private sector in terms of research and development, and also the local university. So that was interesting, and I think it quite requires a different approach. Secondly, they introduced a law that would ensure that there was an incentive for this to happen. And within the structure and framework of that, the incentive was managed by an implementing body that included the 5 ministries, the university, and the private research organization, so that they would be selecting the recipients of the grants on a set of criteria that was agreed by everybody. And then they were setting up certification to make sure that the quality and that the goals were being met. So actually, that was my third one, was the evaluation criteria was very, very defined in terms of social, economic and environmental dimensions, and especially the use and reuse and value of the byproducts for creating raw materials for renewable energy. So they were really trying to channel this investment into the right type of products. And then the last one, which was on replicability, actually, and I think it was, in this case, it was replicable because it was small scale and modular, and so therefore accessible to a lot of different companies. But also it was led by community leaders. So there was a lot of farming community leaders involved in the process of developing it and taking ownership over it and demonstrating proof of use. And so clearly it wouldn't work if it didn't make economic sense at the end of the day. But I think that the replicability was very important in this case as well.
Thank you, Amanda. I now turn to Majid Ideisan. What were the lessons you learned from the project, and what are your projects, your future projects in this area in the country?
Actually, one of the major points was considering our initial perception of PPPs, which was that we are shifting most of the risk to the private sector. And going through the feasibility study of the project and qualifying the participants for the tender, we've realized that it's a more of a risk shared between the two sectors, and the fact that a lot of challenges were faced and solved by also cooperating with the right consultants. So we've worked with technical, financial, and legal consultants, whom were experienced in PPPs and helped us in formulating the tender documents, which presented the foundation for the future public-private partnerships. And one of the main factors that also helped in making the projects more successful was incorporating it with the clean development mechanism, that it was the first project to be registered with the United Nations framework for climate change. Therefore, the upcoming activities in all of the federal assets will have carbon emissions reduction that are going to be accounted for and registers as or are going to present actually the UAE's commitment towards the objectives of COP28.
Thank you very much. Mohamed, you already mentioned the supply chain dimension, but how can PPPs contribute to the energy transition in ensuring sustainability of the supply chains?
Before I answer that question, I've been dying to say this. Nicholas, every time I travel to Amman, I've had a great experience at the airport. You touch upon a very, very sensitive area, and that is the supply chain. I think I'll start with giving you an example of a form of partnerships and direction that's been pretty successful, particularly on the electrification of transport side. And I would really look to China. If you look at how China has progressed with its industry, it's been the example of public-private partnership. Perhaps external actors may use different words to describe it, but in short, what you've had is clear national strategy that, look, this is the industry that we are banking on. Then you've had policy, regulations, streamlining of planning, availability of finance, both from the private and the public sector, and bringing that together. And that has allowed also incentives and breaks for R&D, which setting up a new industry, that's very important to allow for those breaks and that investment to take place, and that runway and that time for a new industry to take off. So I think having the public sector's role in helping to enable finance, helping to bring incentives into play, helping to contribute to a reasonable perceived risk to allow finance to play its role, whether it's from the private or the public side. That's absolutely essential in helping the supply chain develop. Finally, I would say that with respect to the supply chain, that has to be you have to take a very, very integrated end-to-end view. And this is what we're seeing now. We're actually seeing it particularly in the US and Europe. There's a real scramble now to bring all of these policies, which it always, I mean, it keeps consultants very happy and spends a lot of money, but it does start with very clear strategies, implementation, and then you generally see it does what it says, and I think that's what you need. Clear strategy, and across the value chain, an end-to-end view and enablers all the way through.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. Now, I would like to ask each panelist to summarize in a nutshell how they see the benefits and limitations of PPPs to contribute to the energy transition. Maybe we can start with Amanda and then follow the order.
Well, I think particularly in some of the areas that we've been talking about where it's an innovative area, without the incentives that can be provided by the public part of the arrangement, it's not going to happen. So if I think about another case in the Netherlands, for example, where they actually, with government contracts, they incentivize low carbon solutions, and they've actually supported EV market by doing that for large scale vehicles. So it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't actually gone out of their way in their purchasing agreements to make sure that there was credit given to low carbon solutions. So governments and the public part of the agreements are very important. And this case that I talked about in Argentina was very obvious that there would not have been a pure biofuel industry created for the farming community without it. So.
Thank you, Amanda. Tim?
Yeah, I think in the energy sector particularly, most projects are very much driven by the fuel and the fuel that's available and the fuel route that you have available, particularly in some of the countries, the developing countries around Africa. So I think, generally speaking, projects have in the past tended to always go to whatever is the cheapest, most available fuel. Often that's been things like coal and the like. I think the whole PPP arrangement enables government to shift the focus to the fuel of choice for the future, taking into account environment as well, and use that investment and that funding to take the energy sector down the low carbon route that the government would like to do, which they perhaps can't afford to do in terms of capital investment on their own, but they can do it through PPP type arrangements.
Thank you, Tim. Majid, it's up to you.
I think in June or July 2023, His Excellency Suhail Mazrou'i gave a statement about the upcoming plans for the energy strategy and how the objectives are being even shortened further. And we've seen a lot of successful public-private partnerships in the energy sector, such as the Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park. I think it achieved one of the lowest energy generation costs by renewable sources of, I think, 0.04 dirhams per kilowatt hours, which was the lowest in terms of that technology. Now, upcoming projects are going to be highly incorporated within the public-private partnership scheme, as it presents the perfect prioritization for all the public projects. It allows for optimizing the budgeting in terms of federal projects, and it is going to help achieve a lot of the UAE strategies and objectives in the upcoming 10 years.
Thank you very much. Nicolas?
Well, I think that what is important is first that the PPP, for the PPP to be a leader, to lead by example in the implementation of the energy transition. For us in the airport industry, it's of course a must to be able to reach in some years a fully sustainable air transport industry. This is a must. So we need for that to succeed, we need also to have strategies agreed with the government, with the governments, and this is really key. We will not reach our objectives, and will not reach a net zero carbon air transport industry without working closely with all the government bodies of each locations where we are. For us in Jordan, and we need to have the support of these government entities and our grantor. We need to agree on the objectives. So that this is a key aspect. And I would say that at the end, the work has to be done. And for the work to be done, all the stakeholders have to be on board. So it's not a matter of us being there, but all the stakeholders at the airport. I mentioned, and I insisted before, with the employees, because this is also the only way for implementing and reaching this concretely this energy transition. That's why I think training, sharing of knowledge, sharing of experience between all the stakeholders and at a wider level between all airports is key, and the collaboration, of course, with all governmental entities to make the PPP jointly reaching the objectives of the public part and the private part. That's really where we are focusing to, and where the PPP can have a real leading role in close coordination with all stakeholders.
Thank you. Mohamed?
Yeah, just before I do mention that, just a quick comment to Amanda. With respect to biofuels, we can discuss later. There is an interesting future for them in the maritime and aviation sector. So in transitioning, absolutely. I think a lot of good points already mentioned. So to keep my comment short on the PPP side, one area I touched upon, which I'll re-emphasize again, I think the PPP role and partnership is really essential, especially with respect to something like a transition or a transformation, is R&D. I think R&D is absolutely key. So the support, the incentives, the enablers on the R&D side are extremely important. Many of these corporations and companies that come in and look to establish new industries, they're partly demonstrating. They're in demonstration phase. I mean, I would say the Northvolt factory in Sweden. I hope I got that right. You know, multi-billion euro investment, but initially there's nothing there. They have to come in, they have to do their research. Can they get the transportation there? Are the weather conditions right? Can they formulate the chemistry correctly? And I think that needs R&D and a really solid partnership, especially when you're building new industries from almost ground up, or you're transitioning and transforming in a very, very fundamental way.
Thank you very much. We are just on time, so we maybe have time just for one question from the audience. If someone has a pressing question to ask, yes, you can come to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the presentations. My question was on to Clark. I wanted to find out if you maybe on the structuring of your PPP, how do you get your payments from sale of electricity? But I just wanted to find out on the issue of waste collection, who pays who? Because in some cases, there is a debate to say that the waste that comes to you, it's a raw material that is coming to your company. And conventionally, maybe you should be paying that. But at the same time, the local authority, which is also releasing that waste, if it is to pay you, at some point in time, they might say, the payment that we are giving to this contractor is more than what would have incurred if we were disposing this waste, not through this energy waste to conversion. So at the end of the day, I think there should be a balance to say who should pay who. And I also wanted to find out from best practice, actually, who is supposed to be paying who. Then the second last question to Amanda. I wanted to find out from the biofuels initiative, does it really maybe from the experience that you have had, of course the process of growing the biofuel, it's a decarbonization process because there is absorption of carbon dioxide and so forth. But at the same time, as you use that biofuel, say it's biodiesel and so forth, it also generates some carbon emissions. So I wanted to find out on the global level, to what extent can the strategy of biofuel be a decarbonization strategy, or it's just a way of actually transitioning from these finite sources of fuel to renewables? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So, Tim?
Briefly, briefly, just on the costs, it's quite involved the way that it works, but two important criteria. The capital cost of energy from waste plant is not sustainable if the fuel is purchased. So the economics of it are that there has to be a gate tariff to make the economics work for the plant. Otherwise, the capital cost is simply too high. On the actual cost side, you have to consider the logistics of the waste chain, which effectively a waste is generated and it has to be disposed. So there's a cost of disposal if you bury it in the ground. So all we're doing under the concession contracts is, instead of the waste disposer, in our case Dubai municipality, paying their waste disposal costs, which are set at 100 AED per tonne to dispose of it to landfill, they pay us 84 AED a tonne to take it into the energy from waste. That tariff is set because that's a capital cost at a fixed return, given the power cost to set the waste tariff at the lowest tariff that's available. So effectively, in terms of disposing of the waste, it's a saving to Dubai municipality to put it into an energy from waste versus putting it into a landfill.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yes, well, I can't give you an exact answer. I'm going back to my old chemistry now, but if you look at hydrogen, if you burn it, there's no pollution, carbon pollution. If you go to ethanol, you're going up the chain, so there's a little bit more carbon emission the larger the molecules that you're producing. If you're producing biofuels from corn and you're producing pure ethanol, it's probably one of the cleaner fuels. It's certainly cleaner than burning diesel or gasoline, which is a mixture of multi-chain carbon molecules. So I think in general, you're going to have a much lower emission from any biofuel. I'm not sure from soybeans what exactly the molecule is. I don't think it's pure ethanol, so it'd be slightly more probably. But it's a combination of the carbon capture and the lower carbon emissions, and the fact that you're not burning fossil fuels, which are a non-replaceable fuel as well. So it's the other point to note is with soybeans in particular, you're producing multiple byproducts. So you're not just producing the oil for fuel, you're also producing animal feed and byproducts like pharmaceutical products. So everything is being used. So it's not just for producing the fuel. So I think in general it's considered a good thing and an improvement for greenhouse gases. I don't know the exact numbers though.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We have now reached the end of our session. So let me thank the audience for your patience. I'm sorry, we have already gone over the time allowed. So we'll be able to discuss with the participants privately after the session. So I think despite the late time, we had a great session on let me thank all our distinguished panelists for this fantastic session.